Since 1972, the McIlvaney Financial Group has been a conservative, contrarian investment firm. With that mindset, they have created a multifaceted approach to portfolio management, offering a wide array of services including wealth management, a unique short fund, hedging through precious metals, and excellent educational resources. We have had David McIlvaney on our show multiple times because we respect his outlook, viewpoints, and recommendations. You really need to let them give you a much better understanding of what true portfolio diversification is. Just go to McIlvaney.com/Main Street, with Main Street all spelled out, to get introduced and to garner free information. Again, that's McIlvaney.com/Main Street to schedule your free 20-minute consulting session. Hi, everyone. This is Jason Bierek of Wall Street for Main Street. Welcome back to another Wall Street for Main Street podcast interview. Today's special guest is a returning guest. He's former professional commodities trader. He's the co-founder and chairman of the Gold Antitrust Action Committee, or GATA, and he also writes the newsletter for Le Metropole Cafe. Bill Murphy, thank you for joining me again.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Good to be here.
And adding to your resume, Bill, you also played professional football in the NFL, so pretty impressive.
About 100 years ago. That's correct.
You were old school. You played without a lot of the pads today, so even more props then.
Jason, I was the last guy to play outside the kickers that only had one single bar on my face mask, just for fun.
Wow. Well, let's talk about the gold and silver markets right now. Have any gold or silver miners contacted you or GATA since Deutsche Bank admitted guilt to manipulating the London Gold Fix and London Silver Fix?
Unfortunately, it's the same old drill. No matter what happens, we've had our supporters, and they're still there. Great people at Sage Gold, Kirkland Lake, and so on, and Seabridge. And we're having a little get together in Vancouver next Monday at a conference. And Keith Neumeyer, who's been one of the few vocal guys out there to talk about manipulation, is going to attend. But attracting new people is like pulling teeth, and it's really a sad situation, because the only thing, in my opinion, that matters is what the gold cartel can get away with. Nothing else matters. No bullish thing any of us ever talk about ever means a thing because of what they're able to do, and we can get into this. The question is, are they getting to the point where that's getting closer and closer to being a problem, for them? But that, in my opinion, that's it, and that's the reason we're stuck where we are.
That's extremely frustrating, Bill, that no new miners would want to, support GATA, even after all this evidence is coming out. And, Deutsche Bank released all this additional evidence during the discovery phase of, the messages back and forth between traders to blow out stops, and all the different, there's tons and tons of articles now about this. And I know there's class action lawsuits. I think Keith Neumeyer is involved in one. I think there's others that are now popping up against Deutsche Bank and the other co-conspirators they've named. And yet the mining companies still won't join in. Extremely frustrated. If I could add, though, did one of my friends, Andrew Chanin, who's a gold bug, but, he moved into other businesses. He started a cybersecurity ETF, and he was at an investing conference when Gary Gensler was still the head of the CFTC. This was right before he left, and it was a regular investing conference, and he did a speech about, high-frequency trading is manipulating markets. And then he also talked, someone in the question and answer section asked him if gold and silver were manipulated, and we know, during the investigation, they had said there's not enough legal proof gold and silver are not manipulated. Gensler admitted at this conference, Bill, in the Q&A section to a large audience with journalists there from Bloomberg and others that gold and silver are manipulated, heavily manipulated, but he said the typical bullshit answer from government bureaucrats that, we don't have enough money and resources to stop it.
It's unbelievable, huh, Jason? I mean, it is the most obvious thing I've ever seen in my life, and again, we can get into that, but it's good to hear that Gensler said that. I know we had one of the former people in the CFTC, Bart Chilton, really tried to help us, and they shut him down totally, and it's a very sad state of affairs, and when you see what other assets are doing today, art, real estate, cryptocurrencies, the NASDAQ, and look what it's doing today, Amazon at 1,000, and yet gold and silver, with all this asset inflation, are in the dumpster. And it's because, again, of this gold cartel, and it's why nothing means anything until they blow up.
Exactly. And all these other, like you pointed out, all these other assets have gone up like crazy. Silver hasn't even made a 1980 inflation-adjusted high. It's been nowhere close. So, the 1980 inflation-adjusted high would be well over $50 an ounce. I think it would be around $123 an ounce using government CPI data. and it's gotten obviously nowhere near there. It can't even stay anywhere close to 50. So, it's just incredibly frustrating. But you mentioned sentiment. That's something I wanted to talk about. Some of my listeners, actually a good percentage of my listeners who listen to this program, some of my friends in real life who are well aware that gold and silver are manipulated, they've told me recently, Bill, in the last month or so, that they've sold all their gold, all their silver, all their mining shares, and now they're chasing Bitcoin and Ethereum and these other altcoin and cryptocurrencies because they're going up and they have to make up for lost gains. They admit they're rational that gold and silver should go up. They admit it's manipulated, but they've basically given up. Is that what you're hearing as well?
Absolutely. It's the worst sentiment I've ever seen for investing in the U.S., in the industry, for newsletter writers like myself, for the whole industry that I've ever seen in my life. And I'll never forget being at a Jeff Berwick's Bitcoin conference 3 months ago. And they were all excited, and I was so happy for them, saying how mad I was, because Bitcoin was the same price as gold right above 1,200. Now it's something like 2,800. And so we've been talking, our shtick about gold and silver going up, and we've been in a 5-year bear market. But if you've been in the stock market, again, real estate, art, Bitcoin, I mean, you're just making oodles of money. And we're just getting, ignored. And I think that's all going to change, and we can maybe discuss it potentially why dramatically so. But for the time being, it's terrible, and investors can't take it anymore. And if they had switched last year, they would have done great. If they listened to what I would have to say, for example, about gold and silver, where they're going, they would have lost more money.
Well, I speculated on Ethereum last year, but I didn't sell my gold, silver, and mining shares to do it. I still think, these things are eventually going to rise. You have to be careful which companies now, because, with the manipulation, Bill, we're at barely $17 an ounce silver and $12.55 gold. These are not prices that the miners can make good money off of. There's a good amount of primary silver miners out there that are only making $1 or $2 an ounce in margin. So they're not going to get rich. They can maybe pay off a little bit of their debt. They can keep their heads above water and tread and delay bankruptcy, but they're not going to be able to replace their reserves. They're not going to be able to bring new supply online. Almost all the new silver mines I've looked at, Bill, that can replace a lot of the massive amounts of new silver mining reserves, they are not economic at current silver prices.
Well, that's a great point, and I honestly believe that we're going to see silver in the not-too-distant future trade just like Bitcoin is. I know that still sounds far-fetched, but think of what's happening in Bitcoin moving like it just did, what's going to happen to silver. And the reason for that is I believe that they've reached a tipping point with physical supply to be able to keep the price down at this ridiculous level. And if that's the case, and what I think I see happening, I could be completely wrong, J.P. Morgan orchestrated a takedown from 1850 to 16 and did it, every day for 3 weeks in a row down, droning fashion, to get the specs to sell so they could begin to cover their position because they know this is coming. It's not an overnight thing, but I think it's in the works, and I think that's why just the past few days they just sold, the gold cartel sold 105 tons of gold. The gold price didn't even move, sat there. And the gold interest, silver open interest was coming down, and I think, again, they've been doing it now for a couple of weeks to covering their silver short positions as best they can. They still have more to go. But as I mentioned, I believe that once we take out 1850, then we shoot for 21. And when 21 goes, that's when silver goes bonkers. And it'll be a little different than gold in the sense of gold because silver will be is their kryptonite. That's the one that the people won't be able to get a hold of. And you've got all these products that need silver. I mean, you have to have it. It doesn't matter whether the price is, 20, 30, 40. You just got to have it. So if this incredible squeeze is in the works, it's going to be very exciting. But getting back to the sentiment thing, right now, it is awful.
Yeah, Bill, I think an argument can be made that this is probably worse sentiment than it was in 2014 and in 2015 before we had a big reversal there for a while. I think, I wasn't getting messages back then about people selling. I was getting messages about people buying that they thought it would rebound, but I'm not getting those messages. I'm getting a lot of people that are admitting that they've thrown in the towel.
That's exactly what I'm hearing, and it's happening. People just can't take it anymore. And again, if it's be sad for the people that have given up, but that's their call. And all I can say is what I just mentioned. I've been pounding the table on this in my commentary for 2 or 3 weeks now about what's coming in silver, and there's evidence of it. in terms of open interest changes and different things I'm hearing. So we'll see. Again, anytime any of us have made calls like this these last years, it's been nothing's happened. They've all gone by the wayside. But I think we're close to something, and the sentiment you're talking about would be perfect timing for something like this to occur. Just when a lot of people quit is when it's getting ready to soar.
Yeah, the contrarian in me, Bill, all the different great investors I've either spoken to on this podcast or read their books about investing, they tell me to watch sentiment. And when I hear a lot of people that used to like gold and silver and they tell me they're selling, the contrarian in me says, well, maybe I should add some more. And those people, are buying Bitcoin when it's at all-time highs. They're saying Ethereum is undervalued when it's already gone up 20-fold in a month or two. So that as a contrarian, I sold my coins out. I made ninefold gains, more than ninefold on some of my coins. So, I may start putting the profits from that back into silver. But there is the U.S. mint sales, the U.S. investment retail demand for silver is down a lot. The thing about Americans, Bill, I think compared to other buyers of gold and silver in other countries, is Americans tend to not be, the contrarian value buyers. They tend to, and we see this now with Bitcoin and how like the Bitcoin exchanges, some of them are crashing because Americans are going like crazy now to go and buy Bitcoin, is that Americans like to chase something that's already going up a lot. They like to chase something that's already high in price.
That is so true. I mean, it's just the way it is, and that's the American investment psyche, and I think that's not going to change in my lifetime. So once again, going back to what you're saying, as a contrarian in terms of looking at sentiment, this is probably the most bullish time I've ever seen it, and especially relative to these other assets we're talking about. It is really extraordinary.
Yeah, Bill, I think we're going to have to see $25 to $30 an ounce silver at the minimum in the next 2 or 3 years. And that's not me just naming a price. That's the cost the miners need to make a halfway decent profit and to replace their reserves and to keep production levels at current to meet current demand levels and maybe to add on new mines. So, unless silver is at least at 25, there's going to be supply problems. I think, did you see the new Silver Institute report that just came out with supply had dropped, annual global silver mining supply dropped for the first time in 14 years?
Yeah, I saw that. I featured that too. It's a really good point. And all I can say is if I'm either going to be really right or dead wrong, that we're going to be breaking through 21 in the not too distant future. And when it does, it's going to go berserk and we'll trade like Bitcoin. And that's going out on a limb, but that's what I see coming here. I think they've made silver so cheap for so long, and what they've done to manipulate the price down at this ridiculous level at 17, that the silver situation, the supply is drying up, and they've used everything they can to get it here, and they've hit this tipping point, as I mentioned. So we'll have to see, but I think it's a very, very potentially exciting time, and as we've discussed here, just at a time when a lot of people are quitting. I have a good friend of mine. I love the guy. He's been in silver for 34 years. He's quitting.
Wow.
34 years. That's how bad it is.
Well, if they can knock the silver price down another couple dollars an ounce, Bill, there's going to be bankruptcies first before the silver price starts to move higher again. So, we're going to see some of the marginal production silver mines. There's not a lot of capital available to save them this time like there was in the past from bankruptcies.
Well, that's a great point, and that's another reason why I'm hoping the scenario that I have envisioned and laying out to my people about this end game being here for silver and this gradual covering process because of what's lying ahead in the near future is correct.
I want to talk about this Jim Sinclair quote we discussed before we started recording. Now, Jim Sinclair in 2010-11 gave some really high gold and silver price targets. They were wrong, but he said something very prescient too that he was putting out there in the public sphere. He said that in his opinion, when gold and silver do take off, he does not think the retail investor will make any money from it. He said that they will have given up the manipulation, all the games with the price up and down and knocking it back down and making you wait a year or two or longer for consolidations. Would basically the retail investor would admit it's manipulated and would just give up. Do you agree with what Jim Sinclair said?
Absolutely, and we're seeing it right now as what we just discussed, and this is what Murray Pollitt, who was a legend in the gold industry in Toronto, died a few years ago. It's what he told my friend John Embry, that, you know, he was in it in the 70s, and most of the people, the retail people that were expecting gold to make the big move, quit right before it shot up to, what, $840-$50, in which Jim Sinclair became a legend. And that's exactly what happened back in the 70s, and it's happening again right now.
Yeah, and while retail is, you know, selling their gold, silver, and mining shares, Bill, there's actually a lot of institutional money and hedge fund money that is going into the best junior miners. They're financing them for drilling programs, and this hedge fund and institutional money, which, you know, can afford to wait things out for more years than most retail investors, the money is also going into producing, you know, royalty and streaming companies and low-cost mining companies.
Well, it makes a lot of sense because, you know, it takes, as you know, a number of years to get these things to be functional and get going. And so by the time they're in production, that's when gold and silver should be flying. I mean, if gold had kept up with inflation, as James Turk has pointed out, it would be $3,300 an ounce right now. That's how bad things are. And based on what other assets have done and based on the manipulation, suppression, running into trouble, that's exactly where the gold price ought to be going. And, of course, silver should be leading the way.
Yeah, gold can't break its long-term downtrend line yet, Bill. It seems, you know, on the chart, every time gold is about to break its long-term downtrend line, you know, the manipulation, whatever games they play with the high-frequency trading algorithms, just comes in and knocks it back down below that line to cap it.
Yeah, it's been unending. And, you know, in my world, but there's no excitement is ever allowed to be a part of the market. Just like there's no follow-through. It's hardly ever allowed. You have a good day in gold, we have a laugh and not laugh about it because it's so sad. But I mean, they don't ever allow follow-through, which you know create more excitement. And so all these things are fed on themselves, and you know we watch it every day and see what they're doing, and just looking for a sign of some big change. That's the reason I mentioned the silver thing a couple times, because it's the kind of thing I personally have been waiting to see potentially happen. It may not be here yet. I don't know, but it's what I think I see, and that's what we need, something that's going to jolt things and get things moving. My opinion, we're not going to have a gradual move up in gold and silver. It's not going to happen. It's going to explode, or we're going to stay in the weeds for a while, and I think we have some explosions coming, but it's not going to be like it was in the beginning of the century.
Have you spoken to any Swiss refiners lately? Do you know if they're still having trouble sourcing large orders of physical gold to refine into 4.9 kilobars? And from what I've heard from other sources of mine, you know, a lot of the largest Swiss refiners have had to increase capacity in the last year or two, and they're running their refineries at 24/7, 365, and they still have back orders for at least a couple years to send, you know, the 4.9 kilobars into China.
Well, you know, I heard that last year. I haven't heard anything new since then, honestly, Jason, so I'm not up to speed on that. I know that supposedly the situation is very, very tight in terms of, you know, the gold situation, and I think that's why James Turk, who I mentioned, is calling for a short squeeze coming soon. We'll have to see if that occurs.
Yeah, it's just very interesting though with the sentiment, because I mean I've been following gold and silver since Ed Steer was doing his free newsletter with Casey Research in 2007, before, you know, the 2008 financial crisis, and you know he was showing on the charts how gold and silver were manipulated back then, and it seems that things have the manipulation has only increased more to try and cap the prices.
Well, it's for sure. And again, getting back to silver again, this is what's so mind-boggling in terms of their open interest, the thing that I get into quite a bit. The open interest is not far from all-time highs, and yet the price is 17. It's just incredible. And yet, when the price went up to 50 in 2011, now the open interest is, say, 215,000. It was around 133,000 contracts all the way up. For whatever reason, J.P. Morgan was forced to let it go up, or it just went up because they had a different plan to go into action by buying physical supply on the way up and then selling the heck out of the derivatives market 2 or 3 or 4 times more, and then use the physical supply to bury the market, which I'm hoping that they're running short of in terms of what they can do to hit the market right now. And this thing is so out of whack. It's mind-boggling compared to other markets. Gada, one of our favorite Gada people and supporters and contributors, CEO of the lumber company, and the silver open interest, which is a bigger market than silver. The silver open interest is 55 times higher than lumber, and the real market, lumber market's bigger than silver. That's how bad this manipulation and suppression has gone to, and I'm hoping it's getting close to, blowing up, at least when it comes to silver.
So for the open interest, you've traded commodities for a very long time professionally. You were doing it before you found out gold and silver were manipulated with Frank Veneroso, before you co-founded GATA. Normally, for our listeners out there who aren't familiar, when the open interest is high, that means the price should be high as well?
Yes, because the prices will go on up and the speculators will be buying and producers will legitimately hedge their product. So that's what, makes it so incredible that it's at this high. And normally when it goes down to these levels, all the people disappear. And that's usually when it creates big moves because people aren't hedging. They don't want to hedge in losses, and the speculators aren't interested, and it dribbles down to next to nothing. So to have been recently at all-time highs, 100,000 contracts more, which is the number of longs and shorts in an individual contract on the commodity exchange, the COMEX, it is so out of whack. I can't stress it enough, and it suggests that something has occurred where they've gone to such trouble in the paper market to keep the price from reacting, the silver price reacting on the upside, that they've gone to this extraordinary measure to keep selling and selling and selling. And again, all of a sudden, recently, as I mentioned, they just sold in the last 3 days 105 tons of gold, and I'm thinking they're doing it because they're trying to cover more of the silver contracts before this thing takes off in the months ahead. Who knows? It could be weeks. Nobody knows, but it's coming. I think it's much sooner than people think.
Do you think the Chinese would want to manipulate gold and silver down and keep it down so they could accumulate more physical gold and get out of their dollar and treasury holdings then?
Well, it makes sense. Some of my colleagues think so. I'm not into that so much because of the nature of cooperating with the financial interest here, but that certainly could be happening, and it makes sense. I know for years they were accumulating gold and reported on it, and very few other people did. It was a 3 or 4 or 5 year period in 2003 on forward, and I think they're continuing to do that, and they're taking all the gold they can get, and they could pull the plug at any time, but that hasn't occurred yet.
Yeah, I mean, we have a situation now, Bill, that's been unsustainable now for a couple years, and the miners have, I think to their credit, a lot of them have figured out ways to cut costs since the 2011 bear market started just to survive. They've high-graded mines, they've sold off assets, whatever they could get for cash to fix their balance sheet. They've, cut their SG&A expenses to the bone. I think the miners don't really have that much more cost to cut. Out of mine, there's so many fixed costs. You can only cut costs so much, especially, oil prices are pretty low now, but there's not a lot of other ways to cut costs. So one gold mining executive, he didn't give me permission to go on the record and name his name, but he was looking at the balance sheets of a lot of primary silver miners, Bill, and he told me, look, in 5 years, if we don't have at least $25 to $30 an ounce silver, more than 2/3 of all the primary silver miners are going to be bankrupt. He said, yes, they can do okay for a little while, but they're not investing really any dollars on their statement of cash flows into, replacing reserves, exploration drilling. They're not doing any of this. So this thing is not given, the current supply situation and how much silver is in demand from industrial demand and how much silver demand there is outside the United States. I just don't see it sustainable at anywhere near current prices. So I think, $25, $30 an ounce silver is going to be the absolute minimum in the next couple of years. And for gold, for replacing and there's a lot of gold that's mined every year by the miners. I think $1,400, $1,500 is going to be the new price floor in the next couple of years as well.
Well, I guess, I'm out on a limb here. I'm hoping you're going to see those silver numbers this year, as you're talking about, and well beyond that, because if we break 21, all heck should break loose. And maybe it's just a hope trade, but I think all the stuff that you brought up here, I mean, it's setting up something that's closer at hand than farther away, and it's always tough to see that when it trades like it's been doing lately, and the bad guys are out there stopping it. But I think, we're just set up for something that's going to be dramatic, and the silver is going to be the key. And what you're talking about makes it even more bullish. So I think we got a lot of fun ahead, and I'm just hoping it's sooner rather than later.
Yeah, as an analyst, I'm just trying to look at the markets through supply and demand and how price should rationally be rather than necessarily hope. I mean, I hope, that we're going to have $50 silver in the next couple of years, but, at a bare minimum for the producers, and silver is used in a lot of different things. I mean, the producers are barely getting by now. You got Coeur d'Alene and Hecla, which produce a pretty good amount of silver every year, and they're not even making $1 an ounce right now in margin. So I don't know how much longer that can last.
Well, this is why I think we're very close to something dramatic, and that they've extended the suppression of silver, too long. We've had a 6-year bear market, and I think they're it's again tipping point. They're hitting the wall, and we've got something dramatic coming soon. And I think that's going to be the stunning feature. I'll say it one more time, that if we take out 21, silver will start to trade like Bitcoin. And I know that seems, maybe a dream, but that's what I actually believe is coming in the not too distant future. And I think it's going to surprise most people, and it's going to be a very exciting time. And if anything else, what the Bitcoin has just done, I mean, even in the last 3 months, from 1,200 to 2,800, my gosh, I mean, it just at least shows, if this gold cartel is losing control of the silver market, what a silver price could do. And heck, what's the big deal? So it goes to 50 or 100. I mean, which it should go to. I mean, so what? I mean, what's the? You said, if we go to 50, we're back to the same price it was 37 years ago, and inflation adjusted, it's got to get over 100. And so if it gets over 100, what's the big deal?
Yeah, we have a really wide gold to silver ratio, which says that, it favors gold. And there's a few people out there that think it's going to get even larger on the gold to silver ratio. I mean, if it gets larger, the silver miners are going bankrupt. So we'll see.
I'll be shocked. I know, Jason, it's around 73 now. It's just about 75. I think that thing's going down to 10.
Well, Bill, to add to your case there, in the long term, that's actually the geological ratio. So the 16-to-1 ratio that people point out, that was the government-imposed gold to silver ratio. The real geology ratio from my friend David Morgan at the Morgan Report, and he's researched this a lot. He covers a lot of the mining companies. Silver comes out of the ground when mining compared to gold at 9 or 10 to 1. So that's the real geological.
David's a smart guy, and I look forward to seeing him this weekend, so I'll go with him.
Well, Bill, my last question before I let you go. Sprott's been consolidating a lot of these gold and silver physical trusts. Hopefully it will move money out of GLD and SLV. So do you think then in the long term that Sprott buying things like the Central Fund of Canada and, doing audits there and allowing redemption of metal, do you think that's good to add more long-term investors at the institutional level, the larger pools of capital into gold and silver?
Well, Eric's as smart as they come. I was fortunate to be at his retirement party a couple of weeks ago up in Toronto, and what an event that was. And when I say retirement, that was just from Sprott. He's more aggressive now in terms of acquiring things that you just mentioned as he's ever been in his life, and just as busy. And I think it's going to be, I think by the time it's over, Eric will probably be the richest man in Canada when this thing goes to where we think it's going to. Regarding what he's doing, I don't know all the details in terms of what you're talking about, but I know that Eric's the smartest guy out there, so it's got to be good.
Well, Bill, I really applaud all the work that you and Chris Powell have done at GATA. You guys have been fighting the good fight for a very long time. There's a bunch of journalists in the mainstream financial media who won't even allow your name to be mentioned on air. So, I mean, talk about, lack of free speech in today's day and age. It's just really frustrating and deplorable.
Well, yeah. I tell this story. When we were in London, John Emery and Chris Powell and I, in 2010, and we go to meet with the Bloomberg reporter, lovely girl, Claudia Carpenter. She told us that her people would not allow her, and she never has, to mention GATA. So then we go to the World Gold Council, because we're trying to help the gold industry and so on, and we get there to meet the top guy, and he says, well, the only way we're going to allow you to come in is if you sign a release that you were never here in the first place. You can't make that up. I mean,
Bill, I also hear BNN doesn't allow any guest to mention your name on air either, or they're like automatically cut off, or they're not allowed back on any business shows either up in Canada too.
Isn't that unbelievable? And here, this is the United States of America, and you've got all this going back and forth of every issue that hits the the business, the cable shows, and so on, and they'll talk about it ad nauseum. back and forth, Republicans, Democrats, this opinion, that opinion. But in our subject, our thing, you're not even allowed to bring the subject up. I mean, it really is extraordinary. That's how big a story it is. It is going to be the biggest financial scandal in U.S. history when this thing blows up.
My last question before I let you go, do you think then that this is a more sophisticated scheme that the bullion banks and manipulators have come up with compared to the London gold pool of the 1960s?
Oh, absolutely. It's a very good point. You know, the use of derivatives, and it's one of the reasons we didn't realize what they could do to get the prices back down to these levels, and we didn't see that coming. But, yeah, everything, you know, under the sun they're going to. For example, I mean, J.P. Morgan, according to Jamie Dimon, their CEO, has a secret office in Jupiter, Florida, in which they trade $2 trillion worth of derivatives a day. That's according to their CEO. It's not Bill Murphy talking. So, yes, this is incredibly sophisticated. They use every technique imaginable, and that's what I think they're doing to extricate themselves from this short position they've had in silver for 6 years. And I believe that's in the works, and I could be right. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm sticking my neck out, and I believe that's what's going to create a silver price explosion much sooner than anybody thinks.
Well, there's got to be some real-world limits to this. I mean, anyone who I presented with the facts admits this is unsustainable. But, you know, the miners really, I'm just really frustrated with the miners. You know, they're going bankrupt very slowly. They've done, you know, billions of dollars of bad deals when the metals price were higher that they've had to write off. And yet here they are. They're not afraid. I mean, they're way too afraid to stick their neck out and say something and try to clean up their industry. It's just extremely frustrating.
Of course it is. I mean, all they would have to do is get together and secretly and all of a sudden withhold silver from the marketplace. Come on. Hello. I mean, you don't have to be Einstein if you get together to do that, but they're just a pitiful group, pitiful. And that's the reason that, you know, the industry is in the state of, you know, of where it is. It's you know, we've done all we can to try to help and expose things, and we're going to keep at it. And I'm just hoping that we're close to, you know, the silver market blowing up so everybody can see what occurred.
Well, Bill, I want to thank you for your time again today. If our listeners want to sign up for your newsletter or read the dispatches on GATA, how do they do so?
Well, they can go to www.gata.org. My colleague Chris Powell does a great job, and he gets stuff out there all the time. And at metropolcafe.com, they can sign up for a 2-week free trial and see if it's of value.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your time, Bill. And yeah, I think we are giving exact time frame on, you know, when we're going to see higher gold and silver prices is tricky now, considering the manipulation. But I think it's a definite conclusion. We're going to have higher prices. I've been speaking with mining companies, looking at their balance sheets, and I just don't see how this can continue for that much longer without, you know, supply being drastically reduced if prices do go lower.
Well, Jason, if we take out 21 in the months ahead and take off from there, I hope to hear from you.
Wall Street for Main Street needs your help. YouTube stole $7,200 from Wall Street for Main Street in annualized YouTube AdWords revenues, and they kneecapped our analytics down by more than 80% across the board since September 2016 with their new censorship algorithms to stop the rapid growth of our channel. That was money we could have used to upgrade our website, pay bills, and invest in improving our content and growing our business. Our audience of loyal listeners is all over the globe and so large now that if most or all of our listeners were to commit to donating $1 to $5 each month to our Patreon account, we could easily meet our goal on Patreon. Wall Street for Main Street also accepts one-time donations on our main wallstreetformainstreet.com website. That's WALLSTFORMAINST.com website via PayPal, Gold